Who would like to, first off, ask members of our panel? Yeah.
As you know, philosophers are always mounting. If I was a taxpayer and I was looking at how much this university costs, I'd be kind of shocked. And I'd say to you, look.
How do you mean cost?
There's a lot of money that the state's sinking into the university. If you're just a taxpayer, you're looking at it, there's millions and millions of dollars going here. And you're talking about stakeholders. I'd ask you, what's the main thing I'm getting out of this? So my investment's going in there. What's the main thing I'm getting in return from a land-grant university?
Who are you?
I'm a taxpayer. I'm from North Dakota.
Well, Dwayne, what would you say in terms of just in terms of the increase in agriculture, the differential agricultural production in the last 10 years?
Very significant. I think I would answer Dennis by saying that the state gains economic, social, and environmental sustainability and vitality. I mean, this university contributes to all facets of life in this state in terms of social and economic well-being. And I think you can point to many, many examples, like what agricultural research has done for agriculture, what this university has done for community development in the state. There's many, many examples that one can clearly identify if you want to take the time to seek those out and describe what they are.
Let me make a comment. Number one, if a taxpayer were to approach the university as to, so what am I getting out of my tax dollars? I would be interested in knowing where they're at in the state from the standpoint of, are you city? Are you rural? I'd be kind of interested in knowing what their business is. Because I think a lot of people in this state, and I'm going to pick on the city people, I think a lot of city people don't really appreciate what they're getting out of the university. The agricultural people, I think, do. I've got a few trees I need to deal with. I understand that the Forestry Service and Forestry Extension is working on how to prevent emerald ash borer. I understand they're trying to decide whether or not I should fertilize my trees or pray to God they'll do it on their own. I have a few acres that have soybeans. I understand what goes into that extension service to help the soybeans. But now let's flip over to the city person. What are they getting out of this? What do they see? Well, they see their trees being cut down, and they see some sticks being planted in replacement for that. But have we filled the city people in what all has gone into that decision? Why are we trying to diversify the trees in the boulevard? Right now, I think everybody has a bit of mud on their face over this whole flood thing. I don't care how much the city says that they have worked hard for 12 years and they've done several things. In my opinion, we've wasted most of the last 12 years with this flood. Why can't somebody put together a computer program that can do this? We can put together a computer program that can get luggage through any major airport. If we can do that, certainly water would be simpler.
Don't bet on it. Not when it's flat on a pancake.
We have two measuring devices on the Red River. And they wonder why they don't have good data. Duh! I used to figure out drug dosing on patients with one blood sample. That's because it was inappropriate to collect 6, which would have given me all the information I needed. If you haven't got the data, you can't do anything with it. What are we doing for the city people? What is it you do? What is your department doing that has an impact? You gotta stop and think about that. Only the university faculty can answer that question effectively. You need to pound on your chest as to what you're doing for the community. You need to let the community know. Because Dennis, you're right. If I were a naive taxpayer and I saw how much money this university is getting, what am I getting out of it? Well, I know what I'm getting out of it. I'm getting cheap tuition for my college-age kids compared to what I've had to pay in other states. What I paid for my tuition 30 years ago is more than you're paying here. Okay? I'm getting cheap tuition. I don't care how you cut it. Nobody's in the state's going to agree with me, but you are. I'm getting a good education for my kids here. A very good education. They have the opportunity to take a variety of courses. They can take science, they can take humanities, they can take anything. It's not just education. What impact does this university have on the livestock population of the state, on the wildlife population of the state? It really is a matter of the university has to be more effective at telling everybody what you do. You've got a lot to be proud of. We've got to get past this North Dakota thing of, well, everybody knows what I'm doing, so I'm not going to talk. I'm just going to sit in the corner and drink my coffee. You got so much to be proud of. We should be singing. You guys should be singing your songs all the time. You really should. And there's so many things. You guys can go through hundreds of things. I'm going to listen to things that come to my mind right at the moment when I'm trying to keep this conversation going. I'm going to quit now.
Mark, you have a...
In the business community, we measure it by echo effect. If we pay an employee X amount of dollars, we know that that is going to be supporting X amount of people, taxes, infrastructure, businesses. And so in the business world, it basically is a 4X. The measurement of a university is in the long-term effect of how much its value is going to be returned to the community, state, world, country. And just using a thumbnail, I'm looking at almost a 12X effect. So for every dollar I spend on a university, I'm looking for $12 return in long-term investment. That's how you should be measuring a university's impact. And the fun thing is that most universities, once you graduate, adios amigos. The money's been spent and you have your degree. When have you seen a university do a follow-up research project on graduates to see if they have gone into their field? Are there leaders in their field? You find out about it afterwards at our age bracket. Look what I have done for my university. But that's the tip of the iceberg. You want to know what most of the students are doing. And I feel that universities of this caliber fail at that point to justify their return to their investment for the university of their manpower that they've trained. It's sort of like you're gone, seeds in the wind, please grow. And I think the university has a responsibility to defend itself eventually and say, we put on out 12,000 graduates, and out of those 12,000 graduates, 8,000 are fantastic. And those 4,000 that fell down and didn't actually sprout seeds, didn't bring up new ideas, put a leaf of knowledge on the tree. We have to ask ourselves as a university, what did we do wrong for those 4,000 people that we didn't prepare them truly for the rigors of today's world or tomorrow's world? Two big questions, but let me know what you think.
I can give you an idea. I think that there's too much of a tendency for people in this state to see that as occurring within this state. And yet, if you go out around the country, and for that matter, around the world, there are a large number of North Dakota State University graduates who are doing really good things, not just for themselves and not just making money, but doing things that are really, really meaningful for the world at large. It's kind of strange when you're a dean, and I think maybe the president gets to see it too, but when you're a dean, you get to see a cross-section of people. You get to see a bunch of potential students. You get to see students who are going through 4 years at this place, where, by the way, I think that they get more civics in the 4 years that they are here than you do at virtually any other university that I've been close to, and that's been a few of them. Not very many, but NYU, Boston College, University of Hawaii, and University of Nebraska. The students here, student government here controls a hell of a lot more money and does it a hell of a lot more responsibly, probably, than the people in Bismarck, for Pete's sake. But they learn, I mean, a good number of the students here learn civics at this place in a way that is absolutely incredible. But then you get to see alums when you're a dean. And I get to see an awful lot of alums and what they've accomplished, what they've done, the companies that they've started, the new directions that they've taken things in. Whether it's a guy who becomes president of Eli Lilly, or who starts a software company down in the cities that's running e-portfolios, or an architect who actually is the project manager right now for the majority of the architectural work going on at MIT. A guy who worked at what used to be the Avondale, was the manager in charge of the Avondale shipyards down in Metairie, Louisiana, which is now Northrop Grumman's big shipbuilding facility down there, and who was an NDSU graduate in architecture, of all things. And it's like unbelievable to see the kind of impacts, the echo effect, if you want to call it that, but across the country and the world from our people, including the only guy in Europe who can actually handle old Seagate hard drives, and whose company keeps those old big mainframes going for companies in Europe. You know, it's like he's an NDSU grad, you know, and it's amazing to see this kind of thing that you don't see here in North Dakota. And you know, John Hoeven, I love the guy. He's a great governor from my perspective, and he deserves the approval rating that he has gotten from people around here. He does not, though, consider for Rough Rider awards anybody who doesn't live in North Dakota. You know, there's a heck of a lot of the exponent of North Dakota that is out there, not just here, and it's something that John is really missing in terms of where he'll give Rough Rider awards, actually. So I'll just leave it there.
I'm afraid I'm with the governor on that one, Tom.
Actually, just for a little bit, excuse me, I'm going to interrupt, just for a little bit of controversy. I'm going to disagree with you.
Mm-hmm.
You gave me testimonials. Testimonials are good. I agree with you.
Facts.
We need to survey graduates at 2 years graduation, 5 years graduation, and maybe 8 or 10 years graduation. You guys that know sociology better than me can figure out when to do this. Where are our graduates at? What is going on at 2, 5, and 10 years? Are you happy with your job? At 2, 5, and 10 years, what should we have done for you? I'm speaking like as if I'm sorry. It's very easy for me to slip back 25 years when I used to work here. As a teacher, did I hit the point? Did I teach you what you needed to teach? I still have graduate students that come up and tell me, you know, that pharmacokinetics course you taught me is a real waste of time in my retail drugstore. Well, okay, you're probably right. But all the patient care that went along with that, you're using every day in your drugstore. But that's, you are dead on. We need to know. We need facts. We need data. We need to know what it is. We've got graduate students. Inspire them. And I'd say it's probably just because nobody's really thought to ask the question. But we've got faculty, we've got graduate students. Inspire the graduate students. Let them collect our data for us.
Did you know when you graduate from this university, you lose your university email address in 1 year? So any connection to it is gone automatically?
Wow.
Why? Once you're a graduate of the university and you've got your ticket, your white collar union card basically, why did the university cut you on off from the knowledge base that you were at, that you actually honed, that you built?
Well, you know what? They don't cut you off from the knowledge base. I can guarantee you that a good percentage, I will not say, I don't know the exact percentage, of students don't use their EDU email address anyway. Sometimes they'll link themselves to it because they have to, because that's the official connection for classes, for Blackboard and things like that, unless they, but they will essentially use their Gmail, Yahoo, or whatever address for the stuff that they're using.
But the end of 1 year after graduation, the
And
EDU
in
address,
a year or two, it'll all be outsourced. Anyway, it's not even going to be done here. That those kinds of things are essentially disappearing. I would have agreed with you 5 or 6 years ago that it was a silly thing to do, but they're going to just essentially disappear. And students don't use them that often. As a matter of fact, a lot of people don't use their EDU addresses on campus, including this guy right over here.
You're not hitting my man. You know, I think, I want somebody to be doing this work that we're talking about here, keeping tabs on graduates and that sort of thing, and making the arguments that have to do with cost-benefit analysis and those sorts of things. Do I think that's going to advance this institution as a land grant specifically? Is it going to win the minds and hearts of the people? No. Regional comprehensive have to do that because that's what they can do. Community colleges have to do that because that's what they can do. We're land grant. We can do other stuff. How do we touch the minds and hearts of the people in North Dakota? There are two things. There are two things that people in this part of the country really believe in. One of them is, this is a producerist culture. Nothing pisses people off in this state like lazy professors, lazy staff, waste of funds at a university, anything profligate or indolent. That's kiss of death on a land-grant institution. That's one. They want it to be a hard-working institution that reflects the producerist values of the region in which it's based. The other one is, this is not a contradiction in terms, an immense respect for learning. I remember arriving here some years ago, it wasn't long after, of course, a referendum issue. You remember all this stuff, John. And arrived on campus, it seemed like every faculty member around here is afraid to go out in public. They think, oh, people don't like us, they don't like us. No, they don't want to give you your tax money very much. No, they don't like you. No, the respect for learning in this part of the country exceeds any other place I've known. I'd say I can't say exceeds everywhere because that would be overreaching what I can say. Particularly if you go to, some of you know what I mean, Class B towns, that order of community around this part of the country. If they got a scholar, you can't get out of town again. Now, if you're not a scholar, they'll show you the exit. But if they got a scholar there, you have a hard time leaving town. You've seen this, haven't you, Joe? You have a hard time getting out of Walhalla, don't you? They'll keep you there. Immense respect for learning. There are two things, then. We can crunch data all we want, but there are two things that will make this university prosper by being in touch with the minds and hearts of people in North Dakota and of the whole region. And the two of them are to be perceived as a hard working place. And then second, to be perceived as a place of learning. And all the rest might be necessary infrastructure, but they're not. You'd see, this is supposed to be a type of institution that's something other than the regional comprehensive, something other than the community college. And I have great respect for the respective missions of other types of institutions, from liberal arts colleges, community colleges, through all the rest. But this is a land grant. And those two things are what people expect of their land grant. Hard work and elevated learning. And at that point, we've got friends everywhere. Now, that, I think, is that message that we're not getting out very well.
You're right. But let's not confuse collecting data for the sake of collecting data, analyzing data for the sake of occupying your day versus collecting data so you can make an intelligent decision and plan for the future. Those are two different topics. I'm talking the latter.
I wonder if the panel could comment on the most recent land grant federal act that gave tribal colleges land grant status in 1994. And we have 5 tribal colleges in North Dakota. North Dakota actually has 6 land grant schools. And we do have a history of land grant schools collaborating on research and educational projects. And I just wonder if the panel might comment on how you see the role of this land grant institution adjusting to better embrace and work with our other in-state land grant partners.
Dwayne, you know, I talked about corn breeding a little bit, and I know nothing about it, except for the fact that Dakota White was something that we began to sell out of this place and grow long before, honest to God, hybrid corns were the big deal around here. Where did we get that? Where did we get? Yeah, where'd we get the Mandan flint that Will grew out in Bismarck? From where? Mandan. In essence, the history is cooperation, but in essence, cooperation on the other end. I mean, we sucked a little bit from Native Americans in here in terms of what, and then redistributed it. So the cooperation's been there long before they were land grants, certainly. And the land grant at Newtown is essentially, and for that matter, if you want to say United Tribes Technical College, I'd say that maybe long overdue, I guess.
Maybe a bit of an opportunity. What do you think?
Well, we think it is.
Yeah, I like to think so too. There has existed a parallel Indian Extension Service historically, right, down to present day. It can't be a takeover operation, but I like to think there's a real opportunity there.
I'm not going to comment because I know nothing about it.
Well, let me throw in something that has been in my ruminating in my insides for a long time, is that the last 10 years this institution has become much less of a university and much more of a technological institute. And if you want to know how I would base that, just follow the money or listen to our dean, who is proud of every other college. You know, how does that, all that go together?
Well, you know, John, if you take a look at the cover of Science today, this week's Science that most people got in the mail, there's this amazing physical visualization of a constricting blood vessel. That is, and it really is an absolutely amazing piece of work done with the same kind of care to, in terms of visualization, that the DNA models of Watson and Crick were made in the 1950s. But it's done by a bunch of artists. And the fact is, one of the things that we hopefully, I mean, it is a piece of visualization art. And you know what it's made of? It's made of plastic ties of different sizes. And it is an absolutely beautiful, beautiful piece of work if you take a look at it. A piece of art and also science. And the fact is that there are a lot of opportunities for putting things like that together, some of which we pick up on. Others, we don't. And it's there's the opportunities of melding art, the humanities, social sciences, and the hard sciences are there for all of us. And they're there for us in our college, as well as for people in the sciences. Sometimes we pick up on them, sometimes we don't. I think the split between the humanities and the sciences is greater than it needs to be, but it's oftentimes because we don't sort of cross those boundaries, that we remain a little bit separate from each other.
My students are supposed to be working on a paper. It might be a good idea to ask the question of these people so you can get some idea of what to write.
I want to tie this back into ethics tangentially if I could. My understanding of the origin of land-grant colleges and the Morrill Act is related to the Republican ethos in the 1850s and 1860s of free labor, free soil, free men. That a good society required people to be independent producers who were not dependent upon other people, who were not wage slaves at a factory necessarily, who had their own farms, who worked for themselves and produced for themselves, and that an ethical kind of society, a good governing society, required that kind of independence on the part of its citizens. And that land-grant universities were thereby designed to produce those kinds of citizens. Do you think we're still doing that in the same way that they envisioned in 1862, given that most of our graduates are not going to go work in the independent producers.
Was that really the ideal?
Yeah, I think if we look at what especially Western Republicans are talking about, it was the ideal that they were rejecting a system of labor in which a society of slavery. They said, we don't want that. And they were rejecting an idea of industrial capitalism in which people were wage slaves. They rejected that idea. And so they're trying to create westward expansion with the Homestead Act and with the Morrill Act that creates opportunities for people to be small independent farmers where they are not dependent upon other people, and that would create independently minded people who were part of the community, but people who were also producing for their own benefit, and they thought that would create the ideal moral society as opposed to the corruption they saw happening in other areas.
See, I don't think, David, that it's a matter of rejecting industrial capitalism. I wouldn't accuse
creating a version of industrial capitalism.
It's creating an alternative route.
Yeah.
You know, here's this other way that people might go rather than being locked into a class system.
Sure.
They wanted to avoid that aristocracy of manufacturers that Tocqueville talked about.
Sure.
But I think you're on the money. It's a very legitimate question. Has been a strong part of the ethos of this institution. Probably nobody represented as well as Alfred Arvold, founder of Little Country Theater. Mm-hmm. He said, because, and not even just that part, the evangelistic work he did in the countryside, everybody knew Arvold all over this region. Everyone knew Arvold. But when everybody had to take speech with Arvold when we went through NDSU. And speech to him was, can you run a meeting? Will you be able to run a popular organization when you go home? Can you chair a meeting of the Farmers Union, later on Farm Bureau? Okay. Can you chair a meeting? Do you know Robert's rules? Can you make an effective presentation of your position at a political caucus and all those kind of things? When he taught basic speech, he was teaching civics as much as anything else. But in that same spirit, that there was art in it too. He was the founder of Little Country Theater. People like Arvold really believed that they were inculcating exactly what you're talking about. I think quite a few crop scientists of that generation had the same deal too. They didn't have the zero-sum ideal in agriculture, you know, that there's only so much money to be made. They really believed that if we can promote flax culture across this part of the country, we can increase, we can make better lives. Going through some extension records here the other day. My God, here's Arvold out to speak on the banks of some slough in Steele County. You know, where they had a little pavilion where people were swimming, that sort of thing here. They brought him in the depth of the Great Depression, 1937. And here's like 500 people to come to hear Arvold speak on the subject of neighborhoods. That was his subject for the day. Neighborhoods, 500 people on a slough in Steele County. Well, you know, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. They accepted Arvold. They saw him working all the time, and they thought of him as a brilliant man. And that's moving on to another thing. Land-grant University, because of its peculiar situation of interaction with the public, has to be always attuned to public desires and sentiments. It cannot slavishly follow those. Dwayne, you can just cover your ears for a moment, but SBER started not so much to guide and enlighten research, but in some respects to suppress it. This is back in Roald Lund's days. You know, we got these scientists who are messing with these silly alternative crops. We need to get them back on the mainstream, dealing with the main commodities. And there was a good bit of that sentiment that led to the formation of that board. And if we follow that advice, why, if a previous generation of scientists had followed that advice, there'd be no Durham industry in North Dakota. Mark Carleton never would have brought back Durham wheat to this country. All these industries that are now our mainstream, in fact, were not cultivated by people who hewed the established line and listened to the party line. They were by people who seized the bit and ran ahead of public sentiment. Now, but to be able to do that, you've got to establish yourself by the sort of things I talked about. At that point, people say, yeah, Heldon's a little nutty, but he's okay. You know, give him a little bit of a long leash, he'll come up with some ideas. We're still waiting. but at that point, that kind of faith, shall we call it faith? Confidence in the goodwill and hard work and talent at the university allows people to take risks that would go beyond what the State Board of Agricultural Research would countenance, which tends to be a little bit of an exercise in recolonization. You know, careful, don't get outside the bounds. But there have to be people. Isn't that what a university is supposed to be able to offer? Enough standing that you can transgress those boundaries and deal with ideas, whether they're in matters of social concern or matters of agronomy that are beyond what the public is quite ready to accept yet. Oftentimes it's a matter of being able to say some things that newspaper editors cannot yet say, probably less so all the time. So that after a decade, the editors can start to say it. And after a decade after that, your state senator can start to say it, will start to pick it up. And if you live long enough, it feeds back on you. But you have to live a good long time for that.
If it has to do with agriculture, Hiram Drake already said it.
I think of high as pretty darn traditional, yes, and that's what we're, that's the envelope to move right there. Well, preach.
Question. In the coming future, I see pharmaceutical, DNA, and legal issues as intellectual property right being key industrial areas where we can actually grow this university. And I believe a law department would be a good crowning jewel of this university, which isn't here right now. What would if you had druthers and the dollars to do it, what would you see as the major growing areas in the economy, and what departments would you grow or diminish at this university? Be careful.
I think law's off the table. Land grants don't do law, except for land grants that follow the Wisconsin model where they do everything. Like in the omnibus states here where we split the land grant off, that's the Michigan State model. Then law goes to the so-called flagship. Commonly medicine goes to the so-called flagship. They share engineering, and the land grants get agriculture. So law is...
You have the infrastructure, but you can't protect what you're actually doing. You have intellectual breeder operation, but you cannot...
Oh, you're talking about a legal department to defend our interests.
I'm talking, no, not a legal, I'm talking a school of law.
Sport.
And that one, you have the philosophy, you have the history, you have the English, you have all the departments to support it, but you have not achieved it. You haven't tripped the light to build a better institution. And that would support pretty much all your sub-industries and protecting it. When you develop a new seed, how often do you patent it? How many patents are held by this university for a particular seed or variety? I don't see that. You have brooder companies coming on in here that have intellectual property rights that are actually being leaked on out. I don't see the protection that they need from the university. I see the DNA, I see the science, I see the coatings, but again, it's the intellectual property right that you have to hold and protect to actually make profit long term. And the university, again, you have the subculture, institutions, departments that support it, but you haven't elevated it on up to now, let's practice law, the intellectual give and take in a courtroom. And I see that as a fault of this particular institution, whether in or out, it is needed.
Well, would you say that the foundation here has essentially, they produced, I mean, they're pretty high up there in terms of the amount of royalties that they pick up. Mm-hmm. And of course they hand them out too. And I think they're, where are we in terms of, Dwayne, do you know the numbers in terms of where we are in terms of relative rank with other land grants in terms of the foundation here?
I do know that if you do have a patent, the student only receives like to 5% of the total patent royalties, and the university takes the rest, and the brooder takes the rest of the amount. So the student that's actually doing the physical work is not getting what truly it should be there, but again, it's a brooder operation. I have to see what it is. But you still need the legal minds being trained to protect that idea.
You know, I came up from the University of Illinois, and leaving out the agricultural stuff, some of the biggest intellectual property deals that they had there when I was there. One of the biggest was Mosaic. Mosaic essentially allowed workstations to house web browsers from that translated the information available from supercomputers to your terminal. And it became Netscape, a company that began like 5 graduate and undergraduate students at Illinois, leaving the National Center for Supercomputing Applications with a whole bunch of pirated intellectual property that the university never pushed. And it never pushed it. It did lay claims to it in other areas, but also did not, it kept Netscape from, how would you call it, expanding on the stolen property, if you want to put it that way. And it claimed it for some other business applications. But Mosaic was the beginnings of Netscape, and also then it turned out Internet Explorer. And by them not claiming it, they ended up actually gaining a huge amount as those companies wanted to expand the uses that they had initially pirated from the institution. And they ended up gaining more royalties than they would have otherwise, by the companies essentially coming back to make sure that they weren't going to be stopped in expanding the uses of the basic Mosaic that they had stolen. And it was a fascinating model to a great extent, and provided the University of Illinois with an awful lot of money. And it is something that we might think about, that you might not want to claim every cent from a piece of intellectual property, as long as you somehow maintain the potential rights to it. You might want to allow a lot more exploration of its potential on the outside by its inventors, and with the idea that they'll come back to you when there are problems that they might run into if they don't. You know what I mean? But does that make any sense to you? That they will start negotiating for royalties.
Bread on the water. bread on the water.
Let me take your question from a slightly different angle. Number one, I don't think there would be a return on investment starting a law school here so we can protect intellectual property. I work with a number of different companies on a number of different projects, on a number of different products, and they all have intellectual property. They all have attorneys with a different area of expertise. For the North Dakota University system to hire a large enough battery of attorneys to cover all the types of intellectual property that could be generated from the North Dakota University system, it would probably be equal to what we're already paying for the university system. They're not cheap. It is easier and far more cost efficient to have the researchers, investigators, research park, etc., share the information they already have acquired on the appropriate IP attorneys, and focus on those attorneys or those law firms that can provide the monitoring, the expertise, the implementation, the patent filing, and all that stuff that is necessary. And I don't know, but if all the intellectual property is going through a single NDSU attorney, that person cannot handle it all. I work with 6 different companies. They're all in kind of the same areas, but different areas. And the amount of, the different stories I hear from the different patent attorneys is phenomenal. We really need to coordinate our efforts, not just here at NDSU within the different divisions, but let me just step out on a rug, which is probably going to really hurt, and say you need to bring in UND's IP also, and pool the financial resources of these two major research institutions to cover IP or contracting those services. It is a gargantuanly expensive proposition. Starting a law school, that's a sidebar. That has nothing to do with protecting the intellectual property of this university or of these faculty or of the students.
But that was one example of a possible answer to a more general question that you haven't really taken up, and that is, hey, what would be the strategic move suitable to a land-grant university given the current environment? Isn't that the question?
Yeah. Well,
And I'll give one for that. And
I'm just saying that I'm going to use William Mitchell as a guideline for a law college, where I took a look at the faculty that were going there. I visited the campus like 30 some odd times, and I'm sitting back to saying that would be or it's too big of an operation, William Mitchell, but it could be pared down for this university with maybe about 14 instructors, and you can put in a reasonable law school that would produce talented students at the same rate of your brooders. So when your brooders come on up, you have talent that actually knows each other, and that they're at the same age bracket, and they're at the same, intellectual push of excitement. Now, if you bring on in mature lawyers that have already been through the learn and burn curve, and they already know where the loopholes are, that takes half the fun out of building a business. It really does. It takes a lot of problems away, but it's more fun dealing with young, exuberant individuals for it. And I'm just saying that the university, that would be another, it's a big gaping hole that I think has vacuum, and it needs to be filled. And it could be filled at this university, or it could go down the road to NDSU and have a bigger program there. But I'd like to see it here, because when you have 14,000 and you're planning on going up to like 22,000 population here eventually.
Oh, at NDSU?
Yeah.
Oh,
Someday.
22,000. We're doing it at the
Well, you have 14 right now, don't you?
Yeah, but we wouldn't be anywhere close to being able to handle 22 grand.
I
Yeah,
heard
there's
they're
gonna be time.
planning on spooling on up to more. Okay. More. How's that?
More would work, but
More.
22,000.
Okay.
in matters like this, I tend to, being office next door to philosopher, I take a lot of the guidance from one of North America's great philosophers, the great one himself, Gretzky. It's not you can't be skating to the puck. You got to skate where the puck's going to be, and that means the realization that we're in an expansionary climate in North Dakota. Now, this is not really hard for a lot of people to get used to. The old oil man's prayer is, and you hear this in Dickinson fairly frequently yet, maybe even in Beaumont, Esther. Yeah, oh Lord, just give us one more boon. We promise not to piss this one away. And we did, the last one, didn't we? But we've got this window open once again, and the opportunity to think about, okay, where is that puck going to be? See, if I were answering that question, I'd look at a couple of things. One of them is, I'm going to stop making fun of MBAs. I think we need a whole bunch more of them. A whole bunch more MBAs. One of them will be the next Boone Pickens. A bunch of MBAs. And the second part of it is livable communities. Hey, Dwayne, pricking up your ears on this one now. The proposition that a whole bunch of places are being redeveloped and repopulated. Not the town of 200. It's just got momentum of infrastructure, but all those Class B towns are under redevelopment. Every one of them's got somebody from California in them. And that proposition of making North Dakota a decent place to live, sustaining the infrastructure that's not just sidewalks and streets, but the infrastructure quality of life in those places. I think we'd have a real mission there too that would pay us untold sums of goodwill in the future and allow us to keep pumping out future leaders like that way. I think those are pretty important places where the puck's going to be.
Yes.
One question that I have, it's been touched on before, but where do you see the liberal arts as being in the future of the land grant? Where is the puck going to be for the liberal arts? I've heard a lot of mention of business and what else? Architecture, engineering, a lot of the other more scientific and mathematical arenas. But what about the liberal arts? Where are those going to be?
Well, pretty obvious. I think that that to some extent Tom kind of described where the liberal arts were in this place when he described Mr. Chisholm's artisan-like life. Life is the liberal artisanship, if you want to call it that. And we have an awful lot of that that has been here in the past, and I think will continue to be here in the future. The idea of critical thinking is extremely important, and it's something that is fostered and honed through the liberal arts, or should be, at any rate. The idea, too, of bringing, I think, the two cultures together again is extremely important. And, you know, I do believe that, that one of the things that we are seeing in the 21st century is the idea of bringing together again those things that were separated, that is ethics and medicine, let's say. The idea of living a good life as you're making a living, things of that kind. That these things can essentially and are being put together in somewhat more practical terms than they have been in the past. Mr. Chisholm, I think people were kind of surprised, or maybe you weren't surprised, but I think that that some people were surprised when you said that he had Walter Scott
That's
and
my grandpa.
poetry. Pardon?
That's my grandpa.
And that's your grandpa. Well, but the whole idea of essentially putting together artisanship and the things that create the quality of life, that they were together in a time that we thought people were just sort of hardscrabble. If you were going to be a blacksmith, you were going to be shoeing horses and not considering the art of your thing. If you were going to be going to a short course, you weren't going to be reading Sir Walter Scott in it, you know, that kind of stuff. And I think the fact is that we can get back to that and see the cross threads between living a life and essentially making a living. And that is being woven together again in institutions. The guy who first tried to do that, I think, was Sir Francis Bacon, who first recognized that.
That's a pretty good step.
That there was a connection between them. That Oxford, for instance, was not separate from the kinds of things that were going on when you built a cathedral, but that there was some kind of a relationship, an interrelationship of knowledge from those people who were artisans to those people who were artists to those people who were philosophers. And in the 21st century, we are faced with a huge technological onslaught that oftentimes seems to a lot of us to separate that thing that presented the good life, the quality of life, from where we are. But I actually think that these things are coming together in ways that we're only beginning to understand right now, but that it's different than it was in the 1950s when C.P. Snow separated science and the liberal arts, I guess you'd say. But we haven't really begun to examine critically the way that these things are coming together again. But I do think that they are, and I don't know whether you see that in Brock in the courses that you take. When you look at modern history, well, crap, you look at the history of the land grant. It is, I mean, a lot of the advances were made are technical advances. Vannevar Bush talked about at the end of World War II, he said, what are the things that came out of World War II? He said, penicillin came out of World War II. The atom bomb came out of World War II. But there was a new way, potentially new ways of putting together life that came out of World War II as well, that he saw as potential, as being explored. And he saw science for social welfare as well as basic research and the things that could bring absolute good or absolute evil to the world. And that's where the liberal arts fit. And they're going to fit that way. They are going to fit that way in the future. And I think they are, but I think they're tied together in ways that, some people have a hard time seeing at the moment.
I think John's question is pertinent on this. So you can't have a partnership, an alliance of the sciences and the liberal arts if it's an unequal alliance. That's a protectorate at that point. You know, that's a different proposition. Unless the liberal arts elevates its game. And this isn't a matter, this isn't something that a president or a board or someone like that can happen. It most of all has to be driven from within the liberal arts. Liberal arts has to elevate its game so that there is not an inequality looking across at technological fields, at science fields, where people have huge amounts of money, frankly. You get on that NIH bandwagon or NSF, and in fact there's expectation. Matter of fact, you don't keep people around unless if they continually can produce the money to fund major research program year after year after year. That'll never happen in liberal arts. Liberal arts have to elevate in another way, such that by the standards that prevail in those disciplines, they are in every way equal to the best agronomists that the experiment station has, the best engineers that that college has, the best biologists and chemists, science and math has. And we have a way to go on that, frankly. Unless there's a buy-in, because I would say within liberal arts in this institution, you don't have full buy-in in that elevated institutional mission. There are people who are digging, same people who are kind of digging in their heels on things like D1 athletics and that sort of thing, have the same sort of gut reaction oftentimes to the establishment of PhD programs, that sort of thing. How long did it take English to start their PhD program, for Pete's sake? You know? Yeah, see, this is what I mean. There will always be unequal. If English won't elevate the level of chemistry, then you can never have that. You can't meet if you're traveling on two different levels. Okay, now that was preaching to it, but I think that gets at John's question too. We've met the enemy and he's us. You know, liberal arts have got to elevate.
Let me switch to
one final comment, Jim, and then
switch to a practical on your question of liberal arts.
Okay.
I think the science community is slowly becoming aware that liberal arts is a critical part that has been missing in a lot of us scientists. Speaking as a business person, we brought in the liberal arts people to teach the scientists how to interact, how to be managers, how to understand what was going on in the environment around them, because it had not been appropriately taught to our science staff. And I'm going to be real specific with pracs. We've got chemists, we've got biologists, we have health professionals. Well, physicians usually have a nice liberal arts before they go into their physiciandom, but most of the rest of us did not. And we found that the only way to make pracs successful was to bring liberal arts in. We brought in outside lecturers, we brought in outside consultants, we brought in a variety of liberal arts people, so that scientists are very ABC. There's black, there's white, there's gray, we minimize the gray. Liberal arts people see through this, and they understand. It's a matter of you've got to be able to get the liberal, I mean, if you're just going to focus on liberal arts, you got to figure out how to focus, how to communicate with the scientists, because they are in desperate need of enlightenment. Desperate need. We're successful because we brought liberal arts into our scientific operation. That is a major role in its success.
How old were you when you did that? Yeah.
Oh, hell, I don't know. It was late because I managed to get through school or get through college without taking liberal arts. But I was lucky. Thanks to the Vietnam War and a draft number of 13 and a few years working with the Indian Health Service, I was living and breathing and eating with physicians who had a very good liberal arts background. They taught me liberal arts. But I did not understand its importance until I have been running my business for a number of years. Because as a scientist, these things weren't working, why not? And then I stumbled across a liberal arts person that came in to help us understand the staff. And so like, come on, I don't get it. Liberal arts people had to pound on my thick skull to get me to understand what you were trying to say, because it's not obvious. So it goes back to what Tom is saying. If liberal arts wants to get ahead in the world, you got to step to the plate. The enemy is IT and science. Tackle them. Tackle them to the floor and show them what it's all about. Because we're not going to take it on our own. You're going to have to force us. Unless we have leadership that sees and understands that and makes it happen. And for the businesses, we're already beginning to understand that. We're beginning to figure it out. We don't exactly know how to fix it, but we're understanding it and we're trying to fix it.
I think we should end on that very high note.
Thank you for coming.